The first thing Dragon King Kael set ablaze inside Tamsin Rook's foundry was the floor. Star bronze dust flashed blue beneath his boots. Outside, an ash storm battered the shutters. Two royal guards stumbled through the doorway behind him. Kael filled the entrance like a creature carved from war. Black scales climbed his throat, blood ran from beneath his ribs, and white gold crownfire poured from his skin. Behind Tamsin, 11 groundborn fugitives hid beneath the casting platform. Closest to the furnace crouched Neri, the wingless dragon child Tamsin had rescued from a levee wagon. Her horns had begun to glow. Crownfire did not merely burn, it commanded. Without wings or a dragon form, Neri could not release another dragon's power. One full pulse could stop her heart. Tamsin seized the casting hook and pointed it at Kael's chest. "Quench your fire." Kael's amber eyes found hers. He did not obey. For 3 seconds, the fire climbed higher. His eyes reddened. The scales along his neck lifted like blades, and the pressure of his command drove the refugees lower. Neri made a broken sound. Tamsin stepped forward until the hook nearly touched his breastplate. "Quench it, or I let the dust take us both." His jaw hardened. She saw the instinct to dominate, and the choice not to. Kael closed his hand over the cracked scales near his wound. The crownfire vanished. The blue flames died. Neri collapsed against the bricks, gasping. One guard whispered, "You obeyed her." Kael kept his gaze on Tamsin. "I chose not to burn her house." A black iron bolt struck the wall. Kael turned, fire flashing beneath his skin. "No fire," Tamsin warned. He drew his sword instead. Tamsin pulled the furnace lever. Cooling sand smothered the sparks, and the casting shield crashed over the entrance. Then blood struck the stone. Kael swayed before his knees failed. His guards carried him to the casting table. Tamsin cut through the leather at his ribs. A jagged iron shard had entered between 2 crown scales and cracked one nearly in half. The scale pulsed with gold light, sending a metallic vibration through the table. Tamsin felt it in her teeth. She hated touching royal scales, hated more that she was about to save a man who could condemn everyone beneath her roof with one command. Her fear was sharp and useless. It could guide her hands, but not rule them. She gripped the shard with iron tongs. Kael caught her wrist. Heat surged through his palm. "If you pull it free, the scale may release my fire. Then keep it quenched." "You speak as though it is simple." "No. Everyone here dies if you fail." Something shifted in his expression. He released her. Tamsin pulled. The shard came free. Crownfire flashed beneath Kael's skin, but he forced it down. His hand closed around her wrist again, not to stop her, but because his body reacted before his pride could. Heat passed into her skin. Kael breathed in smoke, hot metal, and cooled iron clinging to her clothes. For the first time in years, the fire in his chest did not want to consume what it found. Tamsin removed his hand and pressed a wet cloth around the damaged scale. Her touch was firm but careful. Kael lay still, giving no orders. Neri crept forward and offered Tamsin a clay flask. Tamsin poured water over the cloth, then held it to Kael without meeting his eyes. Outside, ash hissed against the shield. Inside, there was only breathing, dripping water, and cooling metal. "You do not tremble," Kael said. "Trembling makes it difficult to remove iron." Neri leaned closer. "The scale is singing." Tamsin froze. The crown scale had changed from gold to an impossible blue. A hairline fracture sealed along one edge as a low metallic note spread through the foundry. She knew that sound. Tamsin opened the locked drawer beneath her mother's workbench. Inside lay a forbidden fragment from bellfounder, the evidence that had condemned her mother as a traitor. The instant she lifted it, the fragment began vibrating violently. Kael's blue-black scale answered. His eyes opened, and for the first time, the Dragon King looked afraid. "That tone," he said, "I have heard it in every ashstorm since the day I took the crown." The first royal horn sounded before Tamsin finished binding Kael's wound. The note rolled through the ashstorm, deep enough to shake dust from the rafters. A second horn answered from the western road. Then armored boots surrounded the foundry. Neri retreated beneath the casting platform. The other refugees followed, pulling ore baskets across the opening. Captain Ilian moved toward the furnace shield. "The crown wardens have found us." "They found the king," Tamsin corrected. "Whether they find anyone else depends on what happens next." Kael pushed himself upright. The blue-black crown scale near his ribs had stopped singing, but its unnatural color remained. Sweat darkened his hair, and one hand pressed against the bandage beneath his torn armor. A voice rose outside. "By order of High Chancellor Varos Sarn, all workshops along the Sovereign's route are subject to seizure and inspection. Open in the King's name." Tamsin looked at Kael. "Your Chancellor moves quickly." "Too quickly." The quiet answer changed the room. Kael reached for his sword. Tamsin caught the hilt before he could lift it. "You can barely stand." "I do not need to stand long." "That sounds impressive until you collapse on my floor again." His eyes narrowed, but he released the weapon. The warden struck the outer shield. Kael crossed the foundry without Crownfire, each step controlled through pain. Tamsin raised the barrier only high enough for him to be seen. A dozen wardens waited in the yard wearing black scale armor. Their commander dropped to one knee. "Majesty, Chancellor Varos ordered us to secure every structure and detain all occupants until the foreign saboteurs are found." "No one enters this foundry," Kael said. The commander hesitated. "The emergency writ bears the Regency seal. My living voice outranks a piece of wax." The wardens bowed, but Tamsin saw the calculation in their commander's face. They would obey now. Varos would demand an explanation later. Kael lowered the shield. "You delayed them," Tamsin said. "You did not stop them." "No. Then we need terms." Captain Ilian stared at her. "You are bargaining while the king's enemies hunt him?" "I am bargaining because his government is surrounding my home." Kael leaned against the casting table. "What do you want?" "Not safety. Safety granted by a king could be withdrawn by the same hand." "Access to Bell 3, Tamsin said, "and the original levy records from the year my mother was condemned." Ilian gave a harsh laugh. "Those archives are sealed." "Then unseal them." Kael studied her. "In exchange for what?" "I stabilize your scale. I determine why it answered a fragment of Bell 4, and I tell you whether the sound inside the ashstorms is killing you." The last words erased the captain's amusement. Kael glanced at the blue-black scale. "You believe it is." "I believe your Crownfire is reacting to something built into the bells. Belief is not proof. Give me access and I will find proof." He remained silent until another horn sounded. "You could ask for a pardon," he said. "For a crime I did not commit?" "Royal protection, then." "Protection is only another form of ownership when I cannot refuse it." Something unreadable moved behind his eyes. "You will have Bell 3 and the levy archives. Written authorization. I have given you my word." Your wardens arrived carrying Varos's. A trace of amusement touched Kael's face before pain erased it. He ordered Ilian to prepare the writ. Tamsin returned to the workbench and softened a strip of star bronze over a cooling mold. She shaped it into a narrow brace and pressed it around Kael's damaged scale. The metal immediately glowed red. Kael's Crownfire pushed against it. "Lower your command," she said. "I am not commanding anyone. You are a king. Your body has forgotten the difference." His gaze sharpened. Let the fire exist without forcing it to obey you. For several breaths, nothing changed. Then the pressure eased. The brace cooled from red to dark silver, and the fracture stopped spreading. Tamsin drew back, breathing over the blisters rising across her fingers. Kael looked at her injured hand. His own fingers tightened once against the table, as though resisting the instinct to reach for her. Then he deliberately opened his hand and let it fall to his side. Without speaking, he removed a folded piece of clean linen from inside his coat. He placed it on the workbench beside her burned fingers, then stepped back far enough that accepting it remained her choice. Tamsin stared at the cloth. He had offered care without touching her, ordering her, or turning her pain into a debt. She wrapped the linen around her hand. "You should have released the brace," Kael said, "and let the scale split. I did not order you to suffer for me. No, I chose the cost." The words held between them. Before dusk, Kael placed the signed writ in Tamsin's uninjured hand. The refugees would remain hidden under Ilian's protection while she traveled with the king. Neri gripped Tamsin's sleeve. "Will the bell sing like his scale? I intend to find out." Tamsin left the foundry beside Kael beneath a sky thick with gray fire. Bell 3 waited in the eastern tower, immense and silent above the capital. But when Tamsin stepped beneath its bronze shadow, she heard two notes. The first was the clear, protective tone recorded in every guild manual. The second crawled beneath it like a voice trapped inside a wall, and no official record admitted it existed. Bell 3 hung above Tamsin like a captured moon. Its dark bronze body filled the eastern tower, suspended from chains thicker than a man's waist. Old fire marks covered its surface in overlapping circles, each one left by a royal activation. Beneath the bell, guild engineers and court officials waited in uneasy silence, while Kael stood at Tamsin's side. The official note faded. The second remained. It scraped beneath Tamsin's hearing like fingernails dragged across stone. She placed her unburned palm against the bell. Pain shot through her wrist. Images did not enter her mind, but emotions did: fear, resistance, suffocation. Hundreds of dragons forced to open their throats while royal command held their bodies still. Tamsin pulled her hand away. "This bell remembers the levy." The chief royal engineer frowned. "Bronze remembers heat, not intention. Star Bronze remembers both." He looked toward Kael. "Majesty, this woman has no guild license." "My mother's guild casts 3 of the 7 bells," Tamsin said. "Your license was issued by men who erased her name." Kael's voice cut through the rising argument. "Show us." Tamsin examined the bell's lower rim until she found a narrow test channel hidden beneath layers of ceremonial polish. She inserted a tuning rod and struck it lightly. The clear protective note rang first. Then the buried tone rose beneath it. Several ground-born workers flinched. The dragon nobles remained still, but the scales at their throats lifted. Kael's damaged crown scale turned blue-black beneath his collar. Tamsin faced him. "I need to compare the bell directly with your scale." Every official in the chamber went silent. A crown scale was not merely flesh. It carried the monarch's command, lineage, and right to awaken the bells. Touching one without permission was punishable by death. Kael removed the clasp at his throat. The cracked scale lay exposed beneath the star bronze brace. "Do it." Tamsin stepped close. Heat radiated from him even without visible flame. She placed 2 fingers against the edge of the damaged scale. Kael's muscles tightened, but he did not move away. The hidden note inside bell 3 passed through her fingertips. The same vibration answered beneath his skin. "You carry it," she whispered. His gaze lowered to her face. "Carry what?" "The bell's command." For one breath, neither of them moved. His heat surrounded her, but it did not press or demand. Kael had allowed the contact, and the difference mattered. Tamsin withdrew first. She prepared a diagnostic strike using a small star bronze hammer. "Give the bellfire without command." The chief engineer shook his head. "Royal fire is command." "Then perhaps that is the problem." Kael stepped beneath the bell. A white gold flame formed above his palm. The dragons in the chamber instinctively lowered their heads. "Release them," Tamsin said. "I have issued no order." "They can still feel the crown inside the fire." His jaw tightened. Slowly, Kael drew the pressure inward. The flame changed. Its white center softened to gold. The dragons lifted their heads. Tamsin struck the test channel. For one perfect moment, the buried tone disappeared. Bell 3 rang cleanly. Kael stared upward. Then the chief engineer stepped forward. "Majesty, permit me to restore the proper activation." Before Tamsin could stop him, he spoke the formal command sequence. Kael's flame sharpened. The hidden tone returned with enough force to drive Tamsin to one knee. A high ringing tore through her left ear. Warm blood touched her neck. At the same moment, Kael grunted. A new fracture split across his blue-black scale. He caught Tamsin before she struck the floor. His arm locked around her waist, steady but careful. "Can you hear me?" Unfortunately. Relief flickered across his face before he concealed it. Tamsin pushed upright and faced the witnesses. "Record what happened." Voluntary fire silenced the discord. Commanded fire restored it. The royal officials refused. So Tamsin turned to the ground-born guild workers lining the tower. You heard both tones. One by one, they placed their seals on her written account. Kael added the royal seal last. In the levy archive below the tower, Tamsin compared storm reports with surviving collection schedules. The pattern appeared before sunset. Every major ash storm had intensified within days of a compulsory levy. Not before. After. Varys's clerks entered before she could examine the remaining volumes. The archive is closed by order of the Chancellor. They seized the ledgers, but Tamsin had already copied the dates. 3 guild witnesses carried matching records beneath their coats. Outside, the evening sky was clear. Then a royal messenger entered the courtyard and announced that Varys had authorized a new emergency fire levy. A storm siren screamed from the western wall. Tamsin looked up. Ash was already gathering in the cloudless sky. The ash appeared before the clouds. Tamsin watched it gather above the western walls in thin gray spirals, rising against the wind as if drawn upward by an unseen hand. Moments earlier, the sky had been clear. Then Varys's emergency levy had been announced, and the storm had begun to form. By midnight, riders arrived from the frontier settlement of Cindervale. Its fields had vanished beneath a black wall of ash, and nearly 3,000 people were trapped between the storm and the volcanic cliffs. The royal council assembled beneath Bell 4 before dawn. High Chancellor Varys Sarn stood beside the activation platform in robes the color of cooled iron. His silver hair remained perfectly bound despite the wind tearing through the tower. "Bell 4 must be fully awakened," he said. "Every registered dragon within 50 miles will contribute fire." Tamsin stepped toward the map spread across the stone table. The previous storm intensified after the levy at Bell 3. Varys did not look at her. A coincidence presented by an unlicensed bell worker as proof. "I have 3 guild witnesses and the collection records. You have stolen copies from a sealed archive." Kael stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. The new fracture in his crown scale had been bound beneath dark cloth, but Tamsin could feel its discord whenever she stood near him. "If we do nothing," Varys continued, "Cindervale will be buried before nightfall." Tamsin looked at Kael. "A full levy may clear the settlement, but the bell does not destroy the ash." It moves it. Where? He asked. I do not know yet. That is not enough. The words struck harder because he spoke them quietly. Tamsin understood the burden before him. If she was wrong, thousands would die while their king waited for certainty. But if she was right, the same command would sacrifice people too powerless to appear on Varos's maps. Give me 1 hour to test the lower resonance channels, she said. We have minutes, Varos replied. Kael stared at the storm front pressing toward Cindervale. Then he closed his hand around the royal seal. Authorize the levy. Tamsin felt something inside her go still. Dragon horns sounded across the valley. From villages, barracks, and levy enclosures, dragons were forced into human form and arranged around the bell tower. Iron collars at their throats carried Kael's command through the network. Some offered flame willingly. Others trembled as their mouths opened against their will. Kael stepped onto the activation dais. White gold crownfire rose around him. Tamsin heard the hidden tone immediately. It moved beneath the bell like a living thing, feeding on every frightened breath. Kael, she warned. His gaze found hers across the platform. For one moment, he almost stopped. Then a messenger shouted that the first homes in Cindervale had collapsed. Kael released the command. Bellfounder rang. The sound struck the mountains with enough force to crack ice from distant peaks. Fire raced through the tower chains and spread across the sky in a golden wave. The black storm above Cindervale broke apart. A cheer rose from the council. Varos looked at Tamsin. The settlement is saved. But the hidden note had not vanished. It had grown louder. Tamsin ran to the western parapet. Beyond the cleared valley, ash twisted into a denser mass and turned south toward the groundborn districts. It did not disappear, she said. You pushed it somewhere else. No one answered. Kael staggered from the dais. Blood seeped through the cloth covering his crown scale. Tamsin did not go to him. She seized a rider's reins and mounted without permission. Where are you going? Kael called. To the people your bell has decided are cheaper to lose. The southern district lay beyond the royal walls, where Foundry families lived in narrow stone houses beneath the slag hills. By the time Tamsin arrived, the ash had swallowed the sun. She climbed the nearest resonance tower and ordered the groundborn workers to open every cooling channel. Together, they struck the small bronze plates in broken intervals, disrupting the approaching wave long enough for families to reach underground shelters. The storm still hit. Roofs vanished beneath ash. Windows burst inward. Tamsin worked until her hands bled, striking the dampening plates while the tower shook beneath her. When the storm finally weakened, she returned to the foundry. Neri lay convulsing beside the furnace. Her horns burned white. Each breath carried a faint echo of Kael's royal command. Tamsin knelt and pressed cooling claws around the child's neck until the shaking stopped. Kael entered before dawn, his armor covered in ash. I did not know it would reach her, he said. You did not ask where the storm would go. His face tightened, but he offered no defense. Later, while searching Belfour's lower housing for damage, Tamsin found a plate sealed beneath 3 layers of royal bronze. She broke the outer edge and uncovered a sequence of small calibration marks. She knew every stroke. Her mother had carved them, and they did not mark the place where Belfour had failed. They marked the place where someone had deliberately stopped it. Tamsin spent the night beneath Belfour with her mother's calibration marks pressed against her memory. The sequence had been carved where no ordinary inspector would look, beneath a bronze plate sealed after the disaster. 7 groups of lines circled a single broken symbol. 6 continued toward completion. The 7th had been cut through. At dawn, Kael found her kneeling among tools, ash still streaking her face. You have not slept. Neither has Belfour. He looked toward the enormous bronze shape above them. What did your mother leave? Not a confession. Tamsin laid a sheet of charcoal paper across the stone and revealed the copied markings. These are synchronization intervals. Each group represents one of the 7 bells. Kael crouched beside her despite the pain beneath his armor. The official judgment said she damaged the activation channel. She did. Tamsin touched the severed 7th mark. But not to destroy the bell. She stopped it from completing the sequence. Kael studied the pattern. Why would all 7 bells be activated together? That is what I intend to learn. They returned to the Rook Foundry before the council could seal Bell 4 again. Neri slept near the furnace, exhausted by the command resonance. Tamsin covered the child with another blanket, then pulled open a compartment beneath her mother's old casting bench. Inside were warped molds, scorched notebooks, and ledgers the Crown Wardens had missed when they seized the guild records years before. Tamsin searched until her fingertips turned black with soot. Near sunset, she found a narrow book bound in dragonhide. Most of its pages had been burned, but one diagram remained. 7 bells linked to a central crown scale, their activation lines converging into a single circle. Kael went motionless. Tamsin looked from the diagram to the scars beneath his collar. Remove the brace. His eyes hardened. Why? Because I need to see what your coronation did to you. For a moment, the Dragon King appeared ready to refuse. Then he unfastened the brace and exposed the fractured scale. Tamsin traced the old scars surrounding it without touching. They formed the same interrupted pattern carved beneath Bell 4. Kael saw the recognition on her face. Say it. Your coronation fire was part of the sequence. Silence settled over the foundry. I awakened the central bell, he said. Varos directed the right, and my mother interrupted Bell 4 before all 7 could answer. Kael's expression darkened. Then the disaster was not caused by her failure. No, it happened because she prevented something worse. Tamsin should have felt vindicated. Instead, cold fear gathered beneath her ribs. Her mother had not died defending her reputation. She had died stopping a mechanism powerful enough to involve every bell in the Dominion and the king himself. Tamsin prepared a small star bronze test plate using the surviving diagram. If the sequence was correct, a fragment of voluntary royal fire should produce a different pattern from commanded flame. Kael stood across from her. No command, she said. Not even the expectation that the fire must obey. You continue to ask a king to forget what he is. I am asking you to discover what remains when the crown is silent. White gold fire formed above his palm. At first it carried the familiar pressure that made Neri stir uneasily in her sleep. Kael closed his eyes. The fire softened. Tamsin struck the test plate. A clear note spread through the foundry. The ash gathered along the windowsill lifted, divided, and drifted harmlessly toward the open vents. Kael stared at it. The fire dispersed the ash, because it was given freely. The note faded, leaving a painful emptiness in Tamsin's left ear. She struck the plate again. She saw the hammer fall. She felt the vibration in her wrist. But the highest tone was gone. Kael reached for her, stopping before his hand touched her face. What happened? I lost part of the range. Because of the test? Every correction takes something. A dark patch spread across his damaged crown scale. Its blue light dimmed until one edge became completely inert. The cost had taken from him as well. Kael looked toward the sleeping child. Varos controlled every movement of my coronation. I never questioned the sequence. Honesty does not make you innocent. No. His acceptance unsettled her more than an argument would have. Together they compared the hidden Foundry records with the levy dates Tamsin had copied from Bell 3. The same pattern appeared across all 7 territories. Bell activation. Compulsory levy. Ashstorm. Again and again. Tamsin turned the final page. Every major storm recorded during Varys's regency had begun only after one of the bells was awakened. The bells were not merely failing to stop the ashstorms, they were calling them. The accusation reached the capital before Tamsin did. By midday, copies of an official report hung in every levee square. It named Tamsin Rook, an unlicensed saboteur whose interference at Bell 3 had redirected an ash storm toward the southern districts. Beneath the charge were 3 guild seals. All 3 were forged. Varys had not merely denied her evidence. He had replaced it with a version that made her discoveries look like crimes. Tamsin tore one notice from the wall and carried it back to the Foundry. Kael read it in silence. "He is preparing the council to move against you," he said. "He is preparing you to do it for him." Kael's expression hardened. "I am not Varys's weapon." "Then stop acting exactly where he points." Before he could answer, shouting erupted beyond the western doors. A crowd of ash-covered refugees pressed into the yard. Some carried injured children. Others demanded shelter. Tamsin recognized no one among them, but the Foundry had never refused those escaping the storms. She ordered the lower doors opened. The first attack came disguised as gratitude. A man carrying a bandaged child drew a knife as soon as he crossed the threshold. 2 others threw oil across the evidence shelves. Fire climbed the old guild records before Tamsin could reach them. "Nary!" she shouted. The wingless child ran toward the furnace passage. 1 attacker followed. Tamsin struck his knee with the casting hook, then drove the iron curve into his wrist until the blade fell. Kael seized another man by the throat and threw him through a work table. Crownfire surged from his skin. The refugees dropped to their knees. So did Neri. The child screamed as white light cracked across her horns. "Quench it!" Tamsin cried. Kael forced the fire down, but the damage had already begun. Neri curled on the floor, shaking as the royal command echoed through her body. The remaining attackers were captured. 1 carried a bronze token marked with the insignia of a radical ground-born guild. Another wore a hidden dagger issued only to the Regency Guard. Tamsin saw the inventory number near the hilt. This came from Varys's private stores. She reached for it. Captain Ilian took the weapon first. "It must be entered as royal evidence." "Give it to me." "I cannot." By sunset, crown wardens filled the Foundry. Kael stood before the entrance holding an emergency decree. The attack, the forged guild token, and the burning archives had created exactly the picture Varys needed. A hidden refuge connected to armed rebellion. "This site is compromised," Kael said. "The guild workers will be detained until their loyalties are verified." Tamsin stared at him. "No. Neri will be moved to the palace, where she can be protected." "No." His voice lowered. "Another attack may succeed. So you will punish everyone who survived the first? I will not leave you exposed. You are not protecting us. You are seizing us." The words struck him, but fear had already made his decision. Under emergency law, the Rook Foundry is placed under Crown authority. Wardens moved through the building. They bound the guild workers and carried surviving records into royal wagons. Neri clung to Tamsin's waist. Kael reached for the child. "She will remain with you at the palace." Neri's horns flared when his hand approached. He stopped, but his command still pressed through the room. He had issued too many orders. His crownfire no longer needed flame to carry them. Tamsin lifted Neri into her arms herself. "I will walk," she said. Kael looked at the fear in the child's face, and finally seemed to understand that he had become part of it. But he did not revoke the decree. As the wardens escorted them outside, Tamsin saw royal engineers enter the old furnace chamber. They removed a long star-bronze spindle from beneath the casting floor, the final tool her mother had hidden before Bell 4 failed. Tamsin fought toward them. Captain Ilian blocked her path. That belongs to my guild. It is now evidence. No, it is a tuning spindle. Kael turned too late. The engineers sealed it inside a black iron case bearing Varos's personal mark. At the palace, Tamsin and Neri were confined in adjoining rooms. Kael came after midnight, asking her to help examine the captured attackers. She did not open the door. My guild will perform no royal work, she said through the wood. Not while its members are imprisoned, not while my home is held by force. Tamsin, you wanted obedience because you were afraid. Now you have silence. He remained outside for a long time. Then his footsteps faded. Hours later, Neri finally slept. Tamsin sat beside the cold fireplace, listening through the stone floor. Her damaged hearing had stolen the highest notes, but the lower frequencies still moved through bone. A metallic pulse rose from deep beneath the palace. Once, twice, then again. Tamsin pressed her palm to the floor. Her mother's stolen tuning spindle was resonating below them. Varos had not taken it as evidence. He was installing it inside the central bell. Tamsin waited until the palace bells marked the deepest hour of night. Then she removed the iron hinge pin from the adjoining door. The Rook Guild had helped build the lower palace generations before Varos sealed its records. Her mother had once shown her where maintenance passages ran behind the royal chambers, narrow tunnels meant for bell workers too insignificant to be seen by the court. Tamsin wrapped Neri in a dark cloak and led her through the opening. They moved beneath the palace while the stolen tuning spindle pulsed through the stone. Every vibration drew them closer to the central bell and farther from the guards watching their empty rooms. At the sealed council archive, an elderly woman waited beside an unlit lamp. Archivist Myra had served beside Tamsin's mother before the conviction. I should have spoken then, she whispered. You can speak now. Myra opened the archive with a key hidden inside her sleeve. The room smelled of dust, wax, and old lies. Tamsin searched the coronation ledgers while Myra copied seal numbers. Neri crouched near the door, listening for footsteps. Inside a locked iron chest, they found two versions of the same activation order. The public copy described a ceremonial awakening of the 7 bells. The original contained additional calculations written in Varos's hand. Compulsory levy flames were to be bound beneath Kael's Crownfire, then synchronized through all 7 towers. A note in the margin predicted severe atmospheric discharge if any bell resisted. Varos had known the sequence could create an ash storm. He had ordered it anyway. Tamsin turned the page. Her mother's name appeared beside Bell 4. Master Bellfounder Elira Rook refused final synchronization. Activation incomplete. Beneath it was the judgment order. Sabotage of imperial defenses. Treason against the crown. Execution authorized. The seal at the bottom belonged to Kael. For one terrible moment, Tamsin heard nothing at all. Not the spindle, not Neri's breathing, not even her own pulse. Myra touched her arm. Varos presented the order after the disaster. The king had been wounded during the coronation. He signed every emergency decree placed before him. He still signed it. Yes? Tamsin folded the order and placed it inside her coat. The archive doors opened before they could leave. Kael stood in the corridor with Captain Ilian behind him. He wore no crown, but command pressed from him like heat from a furnace. His gaze moved from Neri to the open chest, then to the document in Tamsin's hand. You broke confinement. You broke my mother. The word stopped him. Tamsin walked past him toward the council chamber. Call them. Who? Everyone who helped bury this. Within an hour, the royal council gathered beneath the central dome. Varos entered last, calm and immaculate. Tamsin placed both versions of the coronation order on the stone table. "The public record is false," she said. "The original proves the bells were synchronized with coerced fire. Varos knew the atmospheric discharge could become catastrophic." Varos barely glanced at the pages. "Documents stolen by a convicted traitor's daughter carry little weight." Mara stepped forward. "I verified the seals." 3 guild witnesses entered behind her. Then Tamsin unfolded the execution order. "This one carries the king's seal." The chamber went silent. Kael read it without touching the paper. Varos turned toward him. "You were defending the Dominion from sabotage." Kael's eyes remained on Tamsin. "I never investigated." "No," she said. "You trusted the man who handed you the order. My mother died because your authority was easier to use than your judgment." Pain crossed his face, but he did not look away. "I was deceived." "That explains your action. It does not erase it." Kael lowered his head once. "No, it does not." Varos stepped into the center of the chamber. "Then the matter is settled. The king admits impaired judgment." He drew a black scroll from his sleeve. "Under the Regency Clause, a sovereign whose crown scales are fractured may be suspended from bell command for the protection of the realm." Ilian reached for his sword, but royal guards entered from every door wearing Varos's insignia. Varos raised the scroll. "Until Kael Ver is declared fit, authority over the 7 bells returns to the regent." Far beneath them, the central bell awakened. The sound was not struck by hammer or flame. It rose from imprisoned voices. Kael doubled over as gold fractures spread across his throat. Tamsin understood at once. Varos had bound the stolen spindle to the king's remaining crown scales. 6 distant bells answered across the dominion. The floor trembled. Neri screamed and pressed both hands over her horns. Tamsin looked toward the western windows, where ash began gathering above every horizon. "The bells are not stopping the storms," she said. Varos smiled without warmth. "No, they are finally learning to obey." Tamsin counted the pulses beneath her feet. 6 bells were awake. The 7th would activate with the next volcanic surge. And when it did, every dragon in the Dominion would have their fire torn from them at once. Kael remained bent beneath the pressure of 6 awakened bells. Gold fractures spread across his throat, each one pulsing in time with the stolen tuning spindle below the palace. Varus stood before the council holding the Regency scroll, as though the Dominion had already passed into his hands. "Remove him," Varos ordered. Captain Ilian did not move. Neither did the guild witnesses. Kael slowly raised his head. "You invoked the Regency Clause because my crown scales are compromised," he said. Varos's expression remained calm. "The law protects the realm from an unfit sovereign." "Then let the realm hear how they were compromised." Kael crossed to the council table. Every step pulled another thread of fire from beneath his skin, but he did not call on Crownfire to steady himself. He placed Tamsin's mother's execution order beside the altered coronation records. "My seal condemned Elira Rook without investigation," he said. "My emergency decree seized her daughter's foundry, imprisoned innocent guild workers, and delivered the final tuning spindle into Varos Sarn's control." Murmurs moved through the chamber. Varos lifted the black scroll. "A confession from an impaired king changes nothing. It changes what bears my authority." Kael removed the royal signet from his hand. "Captain Ilian, release every worker detained under my Foundry decree." Ilian bowed. "At once. Restore the Rook Foundry and all tools taken from it to Tamsin Rook. Enter the transfer before every witness present." Varos stepped forward. "You cannot reverse emergency law while suspended. The suspension has not been ratified." Several counselors looked toward the unsigned lower edge of the Regency scroll. Varos had acted before completing the vote. Kael continued before he could recover. Open the coronation archives. Release the original orders to every territorial council and guild hall. Convene an independent tribunal to investigate my use of emergency authority. Tamsin watched him from across the chamber. He did not ask whether these acts pleased her. He did not search her face for forgiveness. He was dismantling his own defenses because they had harmed people. Varys's composure finally cracked. Your weakness will destroy this dominion. No, Kael said. My obedience nearly did. The central bell pulled harder. Kael dropped to one knee. A living crown scale near his collarbone burned white, connected by invisible resonance to the spindle below. As long as the scale carried royal command, Varys's regency claim could force Kael's fire into the bell network. Tamsin understood what he intended when his fingers closed around it. No, she said. Kael looked at her. Is there another way? She could have lied. There may be, if we had days. We have hours. His hand tightened. Crown scales did not shed. They were rooted through nerve, bone, and dragonfire. Removing one could cripple a dragon's transformation or kill him before the wound sealed. Kael drove his fingers beneath the glowing edge. The council heard the scale tear free. White gold fire burst across the chamber ceiling. Kael's body arched, but he held the severed scale away from himself until the command embedded inside it broke with a sound like cracking glass. The 6 bells faltered, only for a moment, but the regency pressure released him. Kael placed the bloody scale on the council table. With this, he said through clenched teeth, I surrender the crown's unilateral power to compel dragonfire. No levy will be taken under my authority without individual consent. Blood ran between his fingers. Varys stared at the severed scale with naked fury. You have made yourself less than a king. Kael rose unsteadily. Then perhaps I can finally become something better than one. Guards loyal to Ilion opened the chamber doors. Released guild workers entered first, followed by Neri, who ran directly to Tamsin. Kael did not reach for either of them. He stopped several paces away. You are free, he told Tamsin. The Foundry is yours. Your people answer to no royal order issued by me. Tamsin held Neri against her side. And what do you want in return? Nothing. The answer came without hesitation. Kael looked toward the floor, where the bells continued pulsing beneath the stone. Tell me what you require to stop him. Not what she would allow him to command. What she required. Tamsin studied the wound where his scale had been. The remaining crownfire no longer pressed against her will. For the first time, she could stand near him without feeling the throne between them. I will lead the operation, she said. Every dragon may refuse. No threat, no levy, no royal command. Kael bowed his head. Agreed. This does not restore what you broke. I know. It does not earn forgiveness. I know that too. Tamsin looked toward the lower bell works. To reverse the network, I may lose the rest of my bell hearing. Kael's face went still. And if you give the central bell enough uncommanded fire, she continued, you may never take dragon form again. The next volcanic surge shook the palace foundations. Deep below them, the 7th bell began to wake. The 7th bell did not ring. It inhaled. A deep pull moved through the palace foundations, drawing heat from every brazier and color from every dragon's skin. Neri folded against Tamsin as pale light crawled across the child's horns. We have less than an hour, Tamsin said. Kael stood beside the council table with blood still soaking the bandage over his missing crown scale. Give the order. No. She met his eyes. You will follow one. Something passed through the chamber shock from the nobles. Quiet recognition from Kael. He lowered his head. Then lead. Tamsin spread her mother's diagram across the stone. Around it, she placed the copied levy dates, the severed crown scale, and charcoal impressions from Bell 4. The central bell does not create the command, she said. It forces the outer 6 to repeat it. Varos needs them synchronized because separate bells cannot drain every dragon at once. Archivist Mara leaned closer. Can the network be broken? Not repaired, broken apart. Tamsin traced the interrupted 7th line her mother had carved. If we reverse the central sequence, each bell will release what it has stored instead of passing the command onward. A guild elder frowned. Stored fire, stored intent, fear, resistance, pain, centuries of it. The room grew silent. The bells will testify, Mara whispered. Tamsin nodded. Every coerced flame left a signature. If we open the resonance channels, the public towers will carry those signatures across the Dominion. Varos will not be able to call them forged records. Kael looked toward the lower bellworks. What do you need? Guild teams at each outer conduit. The imprisoned dragons freed before the reversal begins. Witnesses stationed at every public resonance tower. And me? Tamsin's gaze fell to the fractures along his throat. The central bell requires royal fire, but your fire must contain no command. Kael touched the empty place where his crown scale had been. I no longer know whether that is possible. It is. You proved it at Bell 3. That flame was small. This one may destroy what remains of your dragon form. He did not hesitate. Then use it. Tamsin's expression hardened. You do not give me your life, because guilt makes death easier than change. His eyes held hers. I am not asking to die. Good. Because your task is to survive while obeying someone else. For the first time since the council assembled, a faint warmth entered his face. I understand. Tamsin divided the guild workers into 6 teams. Each would descend through a separate maintenance shaft and sever an outer bell's command chain at her signal. Captain Ilian took soldiers loyal to Kael and moved toward the levy prisons. Neri caught Tamsin's burned hand before she could leave. You are coming back? Tamsin knelt. I will do everything I can. That is not the same as yes. No. Tamsin touched her forehead to the child's. It is the truth. Neri removed the wooden bead she wore around her neck and pressed it into Tamsin's palm. Then take something that wants you home. Tamsin closed her fingers around it. She and Kael descended into the lower bellworks while the palace shook around them. The passages grew hotter with every level. Golden light bled through cracks in the stone, pulsing with thousands of stolen heart fires. Kael walked behind her. He did not overtake her at the narrow bridges. He did not question her timing. When she stopped, he stopped. At the final gate, Tamsin held up one hand. If I say withdraw, you withdraw. Even if it leaves you inside, especially then. His jaw tightened. Say it. I will obey. The words cost him more than any oath of loyalty. Tamsin opened the gate. The central bell hung over a chasm of white fire. Beneath it, dozens of dragons were chained to iron frames while narrow tubes pulled flame from their mouths. Varos stood on the opposite platform beside the stolen tuning spindle. He had expected them. You taught him submission quickly, Varos called. I taught him the difference between trust and control. Tamsin lifted her hammer. Across the Dominion, the guild teams reached their stations. Ilian's soldiers entered the levy prisons. Mara opened the public resonance towers to witnesses. Everything depended on Tamsin's signal. Varos drove the tuning spindle into the central channel. Iron gates crashed shut behind Tamsin and Kael. 2 access bridges collapsed into the chasm. The bell awakened fully. Kael cried out as invisible chains seized the remaining crown scales beneath his skin. White gold fire tore from his chest and streamed toward the bell. Tamsin raised the hammer, but before she could begin the reversal strike, Varos forced Kael's command fire into all 7 bells at once. The 7 bells rang as one. Ash erupted across the Dominion. The sky above every city turned black, while fire tore from dragons in villages, prisons, and royal barracks. Their cries traveled through the central bell and became a single, terrible command. Obey. Kael fell to one knee as white gold fire streamed from his chest. Varos held the stolen tuning spindle inside the central channel, forcing the king's remaining crown scales to feed the network. You cannot stop what the crown was born to control, Varos said. Tamsin listened beneath the roar. She could barely hear the highest frequencies now, but she felt the deeper resonance through her boots, her bones, and the hammer in her hand. Her mother's interrupted sequence remained inside the bell. Not destruction. Refusal. Tamsin looked at Kael. Your fire is still carrying command. I cannot separate it. Yes, you can. Another crown scale glowed beneath his throat, connected to the 7 bells by threads of burning gold. Kael understood. If he removed it, he would lose the final anchor of his dragon form. Tamsin saw the decision in his face. Do not do this for forgiveness. I am not. Do not do it because you believe suffering makes you worthy. It does not. Then why? Kael looked toward the chained dragons whose fire was being torn from them. Because no one should ever obey me like this again. He drove his fingers beneath the scale. The sound of it tearing free vanished beneath the bells, but Tamsin felt the pain pass through the floor. Kael's body arched as white gold fire burst from the wound. His dragon shadow rose behind him, vast wings, black horns, burning eyes. Then it shattered. The command inside his fire broke with it. What remained flowed toward Tamsin without pressure, without ownership, without demand, freely given. She struck the central bell. The first blow carried her mother's interrupted line. The second reversed the coronation sequence. The third opened every stored resonance channel at once. Across the Dominion, guild teams severed the outer command chains. Captain Ilian's soldiers broke the levy prisoners from their iron frames. One by one, the freed dragons offered small flames of their own choice. The central bell changed. Its golden light turned blue. The command vanished. Then the bell began to release what it had remembered. Centuries of fear poured through every public resonance tower. The Dominion heard dragons choking beneath compulsory collars. It heard royal commands hidden inside ceremonial blessings. It heard Varos ordering engineers to increase coercion frequencies after each storm. The final imprint carried Kael's coronation. Varos's voice spoke clearly from the bell. Bind the levy fire beneath the crown. If Bell 4 resists, remove its keeper. Alira Rook's answer followed. The bells are creating the storms. Then came the sound of Bell 4 breaking beneath her final strike. Varos ripped the tuning spindle from the channel. Silence it! The bell rejected him. Stored coercion surged back through the spindle, throwing him across the platform. His guards lowered their weapons as the evidence continued ringing through the capital. Captain Ilian entered the chamber with the freed levy dragons behind him. High Chancellor Varos Sarn, he said, you are under arrest for treason, unlawful fire extraction, falsification of crown records, and the murder of Master Bellfounder Alira Rook. Varos looked toward Kael. Command them. Kael stood unsteadily beside Tamsin, blood covering his throat. I no longer can. For the first time, the absence of command sounded like victory. Weeks passed before the ash cleared. The 7 bells remained damaged, but separated. No ruler could activate them together again. The compulsory fire levies were abolished, and independent guild councils received authority over every future restoration. Kael released the original records publicly and accepted judgment from the tribunal he had created. His emergency powers were permanently restricted. Before the gathered court, he cleared Alira Rook's name. Then he faced Tamsin. The crown has no right to appoint the person who keeps it accountable, he said. The guilds have chosen you as keeper of the 7 bells. Your authority will stand equal to mine and independent of it. He offered her no crown, no binding oath, no command disguised as devotion. Months later, Tamsin returned to the rebuilt Rook Foundry with Neri beside her. The child carried a box of new tuning tools and wore no levy mark around her throat. Kael waited outside. Without his dragon form, he looked almost ordinary beneath his dark traveling cloak. The scars where his crown scales had been removed crossed his throat like pale fire. A faint flame remained in his palm. He extinguished it before stepping onto the threshold. I cannot promise never to be afraid, he said, but I will never again call control protection. Tamsin studied the man who had once seized her home and later surrendered the power that allowed him to do it. You are not entering as my king. I know. You are not forgiven because you lost your dragon. I know that too. She opened the door wider. You may enter as Kael. Neri took his hand and pulled him inside. The foundry smelled of cooled iron, smoke, and fresh bread. Kael looked toward the floor before removing his boots. Tamsin watched him set them neatly beside the door. Then, freely and without fear, she welcomed him home.